so the official title is the evolving role of CCO as strategic leader. So hopefully we're going to have a lot of different insights as to how we can show up better as strategic leaders and business partners. So I'll welcome up the panel. So just to give you the who's who, we have Susan Thomas, client partner at Heyman Associates. Susan, you want to come up, please? Who will be joined by Romana McCraig, Matthew Trachtenberg, and Matt Ragus. Please come up on stage, and away to you guys.
All right, so we made it through. You had lunch and you had the business meeting, so no falling asleep, right? We're gonna keep the energy up. It is. I just want to say we have a dynamic panel here of senior leaders with perspectives that go beyond the CCO, collaborating with the CCO and affiliated functions. Personally, I can't believe this is the 10-year anniversary of Page Up. I was part of the founding. I'm looking at Tom right here, and I think of Mark Bain in spirit here too. Part of the founding class of Page Up, and to look at the vibrancy of this group and the friendships and relationships that were formed and that I hold so dear to be part of this group. It's fantastic to be back. Some of you know that Ron Culp and myself have spent the past 10 years really exploring this subject of looking at the rise of the CCO and senior communications leaders as a strategic partners, business partners. And so what we're going to get into today is we're going to have a fireside chat. We promise it won't be boring. We were having fun cutting up in the room just now before this. And then we will throw it to you all for your questions. And then we've got breakout sessions after this where we'll get into even more practical learning and get to even hear more from you. And one of the magical things about Page Up is the size and the ability to really collaborate and co-create and learn from each other. We're going to start things off. Edelman came out with a report just a couple weeks ago now that was really super timely to kind of help guide this conversation. That report is The Future of Corporate Communications in partnership with Axios. It's gotten a lot of attention. I'm guessing some of you have seen it and probably shared it. And I just want to read a couple sentences from it. Communication leaders have cemented their place as critical strategic partners. Communication leaders are increasingly informing and advising the enterprise on strategy. But then they go on to say, but with this elevated positioning comes expanded responsibility and the pressure from, well, a whole cast of characters. Boards of directors, CEOs, and the rest of the C-suite is mounting. And the report goes on to say, I'd say it's not even a glass half full, it's a glass 3/4 full. It's looking very bright for our field. But there's also challenges, and we're going to get into that as well. One of which is resources maybe not keeping pace with the sophistication and expanded mandate of our function. To start things off for the panel, I'm gonna read you a sentence, and then they're gonna finish it. You all have experience working with and/or hiring top comms leaders over your careers, and your careers span Matt's background in investor relations and financial communication. Roma brings a breadth of experience in sustainability and ESG and functional leadership. And then Susan on executive search and talent. So the sentence I'm going to read is, the very best comms leaders that you all have worked with and/or seen in action, what do they do? ... What does great look like in your book? When you think about senior comms leaders you've worked with, what are they like, Matt?
Sure, yeah, I love that question. So I guess at risk of answering a question with a question, does anybody else here feel like there's a crisis, there is a fire drill every day or every week, or is it just me? Yeah? Okay. Maybe that keeps me employed, but that's the first thing that I think a good comms leader does. What we want is somebody who can walk into a room and doesn't have their hair on fire. That they can assess the situation, they can understand what we're dealing with, and they can create a process. They can calm everybody down, and they can organize and direct. Those people who freak out, right? And sometimes I'm one of those people too, and somebody who can walk in and say, okay, let's look at what we're dealing with and let's create a strategy. Those people are priceless. And so if you are in an organization that is dealing with constant crisis or constant fire drills, being that person who is that voice of reason, to me, is invaluable. I think the second thing is the ability to build and retain trust with your audience, whether your audience is an employee or a reporter or internally it's an executive. For me, it's the financial community and investor. If I can't build trust with him or her and maintain that trust, nothing I say is going to have value. Okay, so it's super important for really good comms leaders to ensure that what they're saying they truly believe in and they can back it up, and that they cultivate a relationship of trust. And then I think the last thing is, to me, a really good comms leader listens, takes in all the ideas from the various functions within a room, and can build consensus, right? So it's never one person's idea. And to me, there are no bad ideas. If you are in a room and people do not feel comfortable sharing ideas because of past experiences, that environment is not going to result in the best outcome, right? You want people unafraid of looking silly or sharing ideas that might not be taken. I think collaboration and building consensus amongst a variety of different functions with lots of different audience members is always going to come to the best outcome. So be that person who asks lots of questions and then constructs the best outcome from a variety of different viewpoints. That's my view.
So trust builder, active listening, no hair on fire.
Yeah, you got it.
I don't need to worry about that.
Yep.
The hair's going. Yep. What do you say, Ronald?
For me, from my experience, I would say a great communicator is a business leader first, whose expertise happens to be communications. And what I mean by that is they have taken the time to really understand all aspects of the business they represent, and they can speak the language of the various leaders they're working with to the point where they are a trusted advisor, and they're thinking, they've gotten themselves in the minds of the leaders that they're working with. So, you know, I was raised as a communicator to be a poet, but my instincts always drew me to the analytical side of things, to the processes and the systems. And I was very much driven to change. And so early on in my career, leaders would give me the opportunity to do things that weren't of a typical communicator. I would facilitate a change management session around building a new operating model. I would write the strategy for an organization's first shared services organization, or write their playbook for an operating model. And it was these leaders who saw that I was itching to do more than just write the words, but actually write the how, and really bring strategy to life through how an organization operates. And for me, the light bulb went off when I realized that a great communicator is just as much a poet as they are a quant. And really understanding how a business operates, why they're successful, what presents risk, and how risk can be mitigated from your vantage point, and where there's also opportunity. And helping that CEO, CFO, CSO, CHRO, whoever you happen to be working with, solve problems from your perspective. I think very much the CCO has morphed into a strategy officer, a chief of staff, so many other things beyond just the writer in the organization. Whether or not you hold that title, to be a true trusted advisor, you're just seen that way. You've gone from being the communications person on the team to being an enterprise leader on the team.
I was thinking when you talked about poets and quants, we're seeing the rise of chief corporate affairs officers. as a title. And I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I've been thinking communication is not formally in the title, right? When you think about the expanded purview and also more of driving, Susan, driving action to back up the mission and vision statement that we've worked on. You work on a lot of high-level searches where C-level leaders, C-suites are looking to hire, that next great CCO. In your experience, what do they look like today in 2023? The non-AI version.
And it's a shame we couldn't have the AI version actually, because then we really could meld several people together and have everything you need. The number of times I feel as if we're saying, right, well, we've got 3 people, and if we could blend those, we have exactly who you're looking for. Because it's really hard. I think it's almost a bar too high to find the person that some people are looking for, depending on the situation. It's easier inside large organizations that have got really distinct verticals, very sophisticated and sort of long-term communications functions. But we're quite often asked to work with an organization that's looking for a CCO for the very first time. And they want them to be all things to everyone in the organization, everything to the CEO. We had a conversation the other day where we were saying that essentially we were looking for a mini CEO who had communications as a top skill. And I think that's often the case. I feel as if we are always looking for people who have had all sorts of industry experience, so that brings great perspective. We're looking for them to have had all sorts of functional experience, and not just within the communications function, but across entire organizations. So I have to say that it may pain people in the room for me to say this, but every now and then we're looking for people who had careers that were true business careers, just as Rome was describing, and then they came to communications. Because that person, this is hard to articulate, but in a way what happens is it's a given when that person walks in the room. Nobody's waiting for them to get into the deterministic screen of any particular conversation about any area of the business. They're already there. By a few things that they say or the way that they react to a situation, in a board situation or a CEO, C-suite conversation, everybody can hear that they already understand the organization intrinsically, and they're bringing the communications perspective. And then I would just add 2 things. I think we're also looking to what Matt and Roma have said so rightly, and that is that I often feel we're looking as well for an extraordinary thinker. Sorry, I'm going to add 3 things. Extraordinary thinker, strategist, and futurist. So if I'm a CEO, that's really who I want in the room. I want all of those skills, and then I want that person to join me in looking way ahead and then back again.
So I want to build a little bit on, you talked about the mini CEO.
Right.
You all want to hire mini CEOs. And then, Roma, you consciously over your career have leaned in to gaining, raising your hand, or then people learn that she wants to do more than comms. Does the panel have thoughts and advice on how to gain that functional experience so that you are more of a legitimate business leader?
So I'm going to stick my neck out and say agency is a good place to start. If you aren't starting in a business and getting an extraordinary opportunity to rotate through a business in every function. So if you're not coming from a business background into communications, that's not necessarily this room. If you're already in communications, then I think, or you are talking to people about going into the career, I would say agency is a wonderful place to start, because I think any situation where you have to think for the client I don't know that we really do that in the same way when we grow up inside an organization and a profession. I don't know that we're ever thinking, I wonder what the CEO is thinking today. Whereas when you're walking in to pitch and try and win business, you are thinking as if you are that organization. Where is it going? What are they thinking? What are they trying to do next? And so for us, how are they going, what do they want from the person who we're going to be finding for them? So I don't know, I think that's probably, agency is one of the things that will get you that. The rest are the things I said earlier, that be intentional. So that's why Roma's on the stage, is because I think the people who've been thoroughly successful in this regard are the ones who've been intentional about getting the experience they want to get to the next stage. Not necessarily just to get there. It's not about sort of, well, I'm not going to get there if I don't have this experience, but who do you want to be when you get there? So I just spoke with somebody the other day who had a long tenured career inside an organization where they did get to move around all around. It's unusual now. Or it's unusual in a comms role to get that opportunity, and then said, but I'm still going to get my MBA because I have to get rid of that last little bit of imposter syndrome if I'm really going to be present in the room. And he said that he did feel that, in the M&A part of the course in particular, that he finally understood so much more about why you might go on an acquisition trail.
So rotational programs, intentionality is really what Rome was describing. Matt, have you thought about over the years that the senior comms folks that you've worked with that have been good partners to an IRO like yourself, how have you seen them kind of broaden their chops to where they can hold a pretty serious conversation with you?
Yeah.
Maybe they're not doing financial modeling, but they understand really what's going on and what you're trying to achieve.
Sure. Yeah. Nobody wants to do financial modeling, by the way.
No. CFO, the CFA is kind of.
There you go.
I always look at those letters.
Sure.
And I'm like, wow, yeah, that's exciting.
I think teams should be complementary. I think if anybody expects a business leader to be good, be exceptional at everything, they're probably setting themselves up for disappointment. I think of it in terms of breadth and depth. Okay, you're going to have functional leaders who can go very deep on a subject or a specific function or a capability. But the rest of their job requires breadth. You're going to need to be able to talk about different parts of the organization, different philosophies, different elements of the product or service offering, elements of the market, for example. But I think when I look at a team, I want to surround myself with people who are good at things that I'm not good at, right? So I actually don't expect members of my team to be exceptional at things that I excel in or that I specialize in. I want to put people together that on a complementary basis are the whole package. I think those CCOs who have been exceptional have been the folks who can put together exceptional teams, right? And recognize that that people have strengths and weaknesses, and identify where those skill gaps are. Somebody described it to me as a T, right? The breadth is sort of the top of the T, the depth is the base of the T, and I need to be just dangerous enough to sort of, skim across the top of just about any subject at a company in my function, but I'm not required to go deep into that T, right? There are people within the organizations, people within the team who can go deep on a subject that I might not be able to identify with, or that I might not have that expertise in. So I tend to focus on building team rather than ensuring that I have exceptional skills in every functional area within.
First of all, I think everyone's going to want to work with you because the way
Awesome.
you describe teams,
Yep.
and we all have different strengths and things we bring to the table. Let's dig in more to the T and that breadth and depth. And we started to talk some about skills gaps, right? So when we say business acumen, it's a gigantic, we call it business literacy or business acumen. It's a really big concept, right? And a lot of stuff can fall in under that. When you think about comms pros that have limited themselves in their ability to serve as partners or advisors, right? Because a lot of us don't elevate to that role. What's sort of those limiting factors or knowledge and skills gaps that you've come across that everyone in this room and their team should be working on so we don't have those limiting factors?
Who do you want to go? Do you want me to
You want to go, Susan?
Oh, that's really, I mean, I guess I want to back off a little bit and say, well, what does that person want? Because if we're saying that this is somebody who absolutely wants to get to CCO, wants, to be in the room, as we've described, then we're talking about one area. Business acumen is one area, but we say just within that one area, because I think there are several others as well. Then I would say, I've had a lot of conversations with people recently, including heads of agencies who are saying, or people who've come to agency for the first time from other careers, and have said that actually numeracy is an issue, that there are not enough people who are highly numerate and can be in a conversation about the numbers. What would the other things be? I think one of the other limiting factors might be an individual who has grown up in an organization, stayed in that organization all of the way. In fact, you asked for very specific examples. There is one organization that will remain nameless that has very cleverly moved junior staff laterally, but actually never up, and those individuals have stayed They've been moved from department to department, and that would usually mean that, okay, I've experienced different parts of the business, but they really haven't. So they haven't developed skills that are going to move them on in their career to become a CCO. So their trajectory is stalled. They were cleverly stalled in compensation as well. So brilliant organization, not so good for the individual, if you think that that's a brilliant way of running a business. So that would be one that if you're in an organization all of your career, the exposure that you're getting is not going to be the same. So one of the things that we've seen is when we've been hiring a new CCO and the team has been there for a really long time and they are as mature as the individual who's coming in, but they don't have the cross-functional skills. So I'll give a specific example. For example, what if I'm in a healthcare organization and I've got research experience but not clinical? I've got marketing experience but I haven't got communications, and I want an integrated comms and marketing function. I can't move up anybody that I already have in the group because nobody has the cross-functional skills. So someone from the outside has to come in. I actually can't even move up one person from one side or the other to the deputy roles, the two deputy roles, because neither of them have those cross-functional skills. So staying still then became a problem in communications. And then one final vignette is that when we have been recruiting for, in particular, some financial services organizations, those that have not yet had a CCO, and for the first time, our interviewers will come out and we will hear that one of the comments is, "You people move a lot." And we have to go back and say, in this career, you do that. You people, you don't need to do that. You need to stay put because you have these long-term relationships. And when I used to work in executive search for the financial services industry, and in particular for investment banking and M&A, which was my background before, and you don't want to move a lot. You've got long-term relationships and lots of money moves back and forth with those people. But for communications professionals, it's actually a really good thing to have moved around between different industries and in different functions in order to be that person in the room.
You know, as you were explaining, you know, business literacy means different things at different levels. And I was thinking there's a responsibility that educators have, like myself, and that I think as a field we've fallen short, and we're doing better over the last decade, of just basic business 101 for a comms major, a comms graduate, that all of your teams, even junior folks, should understand how to speak and understand the language of business as they're working with cross-functional teams, and feel comfortable having resources and asking the questions to at least be conversant and understand the bigger picture that we kind of fit within, if that makes sense?
I think that's right. And if you think about, so I've listened to people going through internships as well, and invariably you will get introduced to the CMO and to other people in other functions in corporate communications, but probably not beyond that. And that would be, in a way, it's an ideal time.
Roma, so I'm thinking also of my students here. So many of them are interested in, they may not fully understand ESG, because we could have multiple panels and a whole conference on that. They're interested in sustainability, right? They're interested in making businesses accountable to lofty net zero pledges. What do you think in terms of what are the gaps that you're seeing that you come across with comms people? Because I mean, like in your last role, I mean, you're going really deep in terms of sustainability.
I mean, the business acumen is important. It's and you can get that a number of ways. The way I got it was actually stepping out of my comms role for several years and working in operational roles where there was still a public affairs component. There was still a change management component. So communications became a skill and not my job. And it really got me into the heads and the minds of leaders within the business in terms of driving change, and then take that back into ESG roles where I led responsible sourcing, I led corporate responsibility, sustainability, community impact. I could marry my communications experience, my business experience, and my change management skills to actually drive effectiveness and change within those ESG areas. I think in terms of skills gaps, what I'm seeing, because the communications leadership role is getting so much bigger and there's so much that's being put under that, including this thing called ESG, or at least components of it, I have found that it's very important to have someone who takes the form of an analyst on your team. someone who is really good with numbers and can turn numbers into stories, can really glean insights from those. So after I got my MBA, that was the first thing I did. I never had a team without an analyst on it. The other thing is helping team members grow self-confidence. And self-confidence from the standpoint of being able to sit at a table with a bunch of business leaders and feel like you have a right to sit at that table and can contribute to that conversation. So having those conversations, kind of emulating those conversations within your own team, talking about the business a lot more and what's going on and bringing your perspective into that and helping them talk about it, learn about it. But the other thing I would say is, where am I going with this? Clarity, to make a joke out of it. But it is having that clarity in terms of bringing all of that together and painting a very clear picture. We as communicators are supposed to take very complex, messy concepts and turn them into something very clear. But that's for a whole host of audiences. And so to be able to do that in an effective way that's actually driving change, you really have to have a strong grasp of the business.
I was thinking of a favorite sentence: seek first to understand, to be understood, right? And that's a big rationale of we can't take complex stuff and simplify it if a lot of times we don't know what we're talking about. Yeah. We're going to go to questions in 1 second, but I wanted to ask you, Matt, in terms of IR, I think there's a lot that can be done with internal training programs where a comms team can come and potentially get a presentation and learnings and understand more about kind of the markets and finance 101. I don't know if that's ever come up over the years in terms of, I mean, you're an internal resource essentially, in my view, for communicators.
So I think, my strategy has always been to expose as many people in the organization that want and would benefit from exposure to my audience, right? So crafting really meaningful communications assets requires you to get inside the head of your audience. Maybe that's an employee, it could be a customer, or maybe it's sort of government affairs. But for me, again, it's an investor, somebody who could potentially put billions of dollars to work, and I have to understand what makes him or her tick and how they process information. So asking for help from another function without having that function understand who they're crafting material for, I'm putting them at a disadvantage. So I invite people across the organization to join investor calls and participate in analyst calls, the earnings events, the prep sessions, because once you can get inside their head, things start to make sense, and vice versa. If there are sessions with media reps or certainly employee all hands, but folks within the media industry, I try and insert myself there, just most of the time a fly on the wall, understanding what their motivation is, again, how they process information, because I can't really expect to be successful without fully understanding my audience. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Okay. So we're gonna it's fun to say the word VUCA as well. We're gonna open it up for questions from the audience.
Thank you. Kent Landers from Hilton, and my question is a bit of a picking up on your point about educating students at the college level about business. So I don't know who in the room are educators, but I think picking up on that point, I think one of the challenges that we continue to see is that universities draw such a strong line between the journalism school and the business school. It's a real problem. And so I actually have a former colleague who's trying to build a corporate communications program at a university, and they won't allow like co-enrollment with the business school. So I know that's like a whole academic issue, but I think anybody who does the line of work do should have a business minor if they can. But it seems like there's a university issue there. It's interesting.
It's academia, and turf battles we're very good at, very protective of silos. But I appreciate you said that, because a lot of times pros will say, hey, why don't you just go take classes in the business school? And I'd be like, at some places that's harder than others to do. So one of the solutions to that has been developing course content that is focused on business literacy that's taught within comms and J schools, right? That comes at it a different way than they may not need a dedicated accounting or finance class. Well, that would be great if they can do it and do a minor in it. And I think we're making progress, but we've got a long way to go.
Hello, I'm Karina Hertz from AARP. So this is a question for Roma. You mentioned the role of the analyst, and I am very interested in getting perhaps some additional insights as to what the right dynamic is. It's something that we've contemplated adding to the team, and it's not as pervasive across the organization. Usually the analysts sit on the analytics department, more of the digital marketing function. So do you have any additional insights or suggestions on how to do that successfully?
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be in service to the responsibilities of you and your team, right? So I've had analysts take on different forms and the different teams I've led, but on the comms team, where I've had ESG reporting as one of our accountabilities, the analyst is the person who owns the collection of the data, the manipulation of the data, the insights gathering. So these are people who come with a very strong quantitative background, and they know how to work with data. But beyond that, they also know how to take that data and turn it into interesting insights, interesting stories. These are people, it's not everybody, right? But these are people who want to start there and then move up into more strategic roles, but they're doing it starting with a very strong analytical base. It's a great entry-level job for people who are graduating from, I would say undergrad, but especially graduate programs. My best analysts have come out with a master's degree in something where they've had a chance to really get their hands dirty with data.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Yeah.
Thanks. So a lead into our conversation that we're going to have tomorrow, I've got a global panel discussion in the morning. But when you're looking at business now, as we're increasingly in a globalized and internationally connected world and with multinationals, how are you helping business leaders or seeing ways for business leaders to grow that international mindset where they may have worked in one market for a long period of time and then they step into that CCO role and suddenly they've got a global point of view? How do you help build the business acumen around international markets?
Really difficult. I think if you've only worked in one market your entire career and have not worked overseas and then come into a global role, you're going to have significant blind spots as this question. And then I think you're learning probably on the job, as I think many people are all the time. We had a client a couple of years ago who insisted that the new CCO had to have worked overseas for a significant period of time. And the reason was that their entire management team was actually from overseas, apart from 2 Americans, and both of those individuals had worked overseas at some point, and they were a very, very global business. And they were very specific about what that perspective, what's gained. When we were talking earlier about, is it just business acumen? My other thing would be data analytics. And then the third thing would be your global, your way of being, frankly, that, you know, who are you in terms of the way that you think about the world? And because business sits inside a much broader context than its own organization or its competitors. And so then that's what I meant about the thinker. Who am I in my experience of being in the world? Have I gone and looked at my own country from another country, and have I looked at other countries, listened to the way that they think? Have I learned other languages to understand, you know, the nuances of that? Those are ways in which we can really wake up our presence and our perspective on almost anything. So I think that any opportunity to be living and working overseas is one that, you know, if you want eventually to be in a CCO role, but you want actually eventually to be in a global CCO role, then I would encourage people to get any opportunity to work overseas. And I'd say that it actually doesn't really matter where. I can remember thinking, I don't want to go to another English-speaking country, and look what happened. But actually, the difference is so subtle that it stretches you even further, I think, than time that I've spent in China or in Germany or any other country. You know, there have been parts of the UK that I find more culturally challenging than moving to a completely different country, and the same in the United States. That can be just as challenging. So if you can't get abroad, move around the country.
So Roma, Cliff Bar was acquired by a global company. Matt, you spent years at Cisco. Any additional thoughts on how to
Yeah, I like that question. Yeah, I like that question because it's something that I struggle with even today. The company that I work for is headquartered in Spain. My management team is in Spain. We're a US listed public company, so the center of my world is the US. The center of their world is Europe. And so there's always this tension about trying to get resources or attention paid on our respective centers. And I think that I have to be respectful in sort of how I deliver that message and try and redirect the attention. But I've learned that data above all else helps. So I would like to think my opinion matters, but my opinion matters more when I'm able to back it up with data, supporting data. This is why I feel we need to pay attention to this market or this competitor or this challenge, and present them with compelling numbers to support that opinion. Anything that's just sort of like coming from my personal opinion about the US being the center of the universe, it's naturally going to put people on edge, and so I just have to be sensitive to that.
Roma?
I've never lived overseas for a job, but I've worked for several global organizations, and I've worked specifically in capacities where I've supported the international division of the organization. And it's more work, honestly, to get to know, countries, especially where you're not sitting, but it's worth the effort. One of the coolest projects I ever worked on was facilitating the development of an international operating model for the marketing organization across 25 countries and bringing those leaders together. And it takes a lot of work to get to know all of these different leaders, but it sure is fun once you do, and you have all these relationships that you've developed.
So we have time for one more question. Advantage of the moderator, I get to ask it. Let's wrap things up by if we could each share a piece of actionable advice for this group and that maybe they can take back to their teams. And I'd ask we keep it to like 30 seconds. Piece of actionable advice tied to business acumen.
I think I go back to be intentional and work out first what you really want to do, where you want to get to. Is it global? Is it national? And then sort of start forward and work back. And then work out. So, for example, if you know there's a specific industry that you want to stay in, be in, learn that, learn all aspects of that. The sort of, I think you're going to break out in your breakout. You'll talk about all the different parts of business acumen and be intentional about those. I suppose there's one thing that I thought of earlier that. Don't wait for it to come to you. I think this is probably for this audience, this is advice for your teams. Don't wait for it to come to you, although you can facilitate this for your teams as well. But make sure that they're getting opportunities to sit in front of all of the different business leaders across your organization, learning things that they otherwise wouldn't learn if they didn't learn that at university, if they didn't have, a foundation in business studies.
Mine would be think about how you use mentors and sponsors. My best mentors have not been communication leaders. They've been CEOs, they've been CIOs, they've been EVPs of global supply chain. I've been very intentional about seeking out mentors who are not in my career discipline.
Yeah, I think my advice probably piggybacks on yours, Roma, which is that, even though we've probably been told all of our lives that we're amazing at everything, the truth is that we're not. Take a real assessment about your strengths and weaknesses. Identify what you are amazing at, but identify where there are things that you could improve upon or need help. And then identify who in your organization, who in your network can help you fill those skill gaps. Surround yourself with people who, again, are complementary. especially if they are in roles that you're going to interact with. If you're going to participate in meetings or work on a cross-functional project, the two of you, the three of you, the five of you are going to be so much more effective and successful if you've identified that, hey, she has something I don't, and the project is going to be just that much more beneficial.
Well, speaking of amazing, this has been a lot of fun. So grateful and appreciative for the three of you joining us and sharing so openly. Could we please thank our panel? And I think now we're going to